2006, Dr. Olds served as professor in the School of Aerospace Engineering at Georgia Tech and a director of the school's Space Systems Design Lab. Prior to that, he was employed as an aerospace engineer with General Dynamics Space Systems Division and later served as a visiting assistant professor with the North Carolina State University's Mars Mission Research Center. On a personal note, I first met Dr. Olds about the same time he went to Georgia Tech, and in '99 I was there. I've known about 17 years, and the one thing impressed me about his organization, and I think Georgia Tech in general, but especially his organization, it's not that MIT and Stanford and others don't have good schools, but the students, they're graduate and undergraduate, mostly graduate students, they're working on their masters and PhDs. He provided a really good applications, practical experience for these students, and they could really apply that knowledge, in my opinion, better than any other school as far as the space applications area. And then I've also been to his company a few times, and there are a lot of young engineers there. They're very excited, they're very motivated, they're doing some great work. And the third thing I want to mention, I think he's going to touch with us also, is you might recall we had a speaker from the Gwinnett School of Science, Math, and Technology a while back, and he has internships from high school as well as colleges and whatever. So he's doing a great outreach, and I think the U.S., as far as helping us in our leadership in the space activity. So with that in mind, I'd like to introduce Dr. Olds here to give the presentation. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Gene. Gene and I have been friends for a long time, and so when he invited me to come, and when Pat invited me to come, I was pleased to do so. I admire all of the work that you do as Rotarians. I am not one myself. I've spoken to a couple of Rotary groups, but I truly admire what you guys do for the community, so thank you very much for that. I am really a space cadet. Is there anyone here who's an aerospace or a space cadet sort of person at R2? A few of you are. I've met some of you. I've met some people here as I was getting to know you, and I know that some of you have aerospace backgrounds. I was born in the early 60s. I grew up on Star Trek and Apollo and Star Wars and all of that stuff, and so it made me want to become an aerospace engineer for my career. And as Gene introduced, I first went into academia, and now I'm in private industry here in Dunwoody, actually just right here in Atlanta. A lot of people don't know that we have much space activity in the state of Georgia. Usually when you think of space or space exploration, you might think of Cape Kennedy, you might think even of NASA Marshall or Space Camp over in Huntsville, Alabama, or Houston or elsewhere. We do have a small activity in the state of Georgia, and if you're kind of keeping up with some of the political activities, there is lately an effort to put a spaceport, a space launching facility on the coast of Georgia, down at St. Mary's. So that's one of the exciting things going on in space in our state. We're a small set of companies, so Spaceworks is a company that I founded when I was first at Georgia Tech, and now I'm there full time. Spaceworks is a group of companies. There are only about 25 of us. And what I thought I would do today is just kind of introduce you to what we do. And then I'm happy to answer questions at the end. But I wanted to give you a taste of the kind of things that we do, because I think it's exciting, and you might find a place to use the knowledge in your own lives to know what we're doing. So I'm first going to talk about Spaceworks and the new space industry. I need to define that a little bit, because that implies there's an old space industry. The new space industry is sort of the internet of space. That's the analogy. So it's a little bit of a space revolution that's going away from government-funded programs exclusively to entrepreneurial-focused programs, those that are funded by private capital. I was speaking to someone earlier today, and they mentioned SpaceX. SpaceX is one of the poster children for the new space industry. That's founded and run by a gentleman named Elon Musk, and they have a very large organization doing great things in space now. So that's an example of that. We have a little effort here in Georgia, so let me tell you a little bit about what we do. First of all, my group of companies, Spaceworks, is really made up of several subsidiary organizations that do different things. Now keep in mind we're all small companies. There are no more than about 25 of us, but we do a lot of interesting things. So the brands I'm going to talk about are Generation Orbit, Terminal Velocity, and Blink Astro, and I'll tell you a little bit about what we do. As Gene mentioned, we have a lot of enthusiastic engineering students that work for us. I have a lot of ties to Georgia Tech, and some of you have ties to Georgia Tech. Georgia Tech produces the largest number of aerospace engineering students in the country, right here in Georgia. And a lot of them end up going to Colorado or Texas or California to find jobs. So we're trying to create an opportunity for some of those very smart folks to stay here in Georgia. So the different companies do different things, and I'll probably best just to illustrate it a little bit with pictures. So at Spaceworks, we are advanced concepts folks. So we live kind of between science fiction and engineering a lot of times, imagining what the future could look like. And I'll talk a little bit about one of our most recent projects, but we do space launch and human space exploration, robotic spacecraft, hypersonic flight. I was talking to some pilots earlier today about high-speed flight, so there's an interest in developing ramjets, and you use ramjets toward practical applications for high-speed flight and other areas. Let me spend a little time talking about this one because it gets a little bit of coverage. So let me create a story for you. The United States and other space exploration countries generally want to go to Mars. We generally want to explore Mars with humans. Now, we've been to Mars with robots plenty of times, and so there's an interest in sending humans to Mars. But how shall we do that? It's a very long journey to get to Mars. It may take as much as 8 or 9 months to get there. So the part of the Martian movie that they didn't show you was the 8 or 9 month journey out, and then perhaps a year or two staying on the surface of Mars, and an 8 or 9 month journey back. In science fiction, there's the idea that you put people into cryogenic stasis. You put human beings into some sense of chill down. We are actually working on that here at Spaceworks in Dunwoody. We're working on that project. It's funded by NASA. It's experimental. We're working with the medical community, but we're the engineering doctors. We're the engineering side. But the idea is that you would chill down the human body to about 90 degrees or so. So this is not a popsicle. You're not totally frozen. You're just chilled down. It's a sense of hibernation. So bears do it. Arctic squirrels do this. And so pigs can be put in this stasis. And you think, like, they'll never do it to humans. But they are. If you are in a traumatic, if you have a traumatic injury today, in the medical community, in a hospital, they can put you into this sense of, it's called torpor. It's basically a light hibernation state to allow your body to recover. Now, usually they don't put healthy people into that state, but we propose to do so. So there's a project we have, and this is what a person would look like in a torpor state inside a habitat. You would have cold gas inserted through your nose, and that would slowly, over a period of maybe 15 or 30 minutes, chill your core temperature down, and you would be asleep. Your heart would still be beating, your circulation would still be working. You would be fed intravenously, so you'd be fed nutrition through your arm. There'd be a catheter for waste, people ask that question. And you would sleep your way to Mars. So you would be in a sense of stasis. A robot would check out on you. I don't know how you feel about that. But a robot would come by to make sure everything was okay. And this is a way that you could basically spend the 8 or 9 months in a sense of stasis, not totally frozen, but it's called torpor, on the way to Mars, so that when you woke up there, you were able to hit the ground running. No for you, okay? Why not? I tell you why this is important, because when you see a movie, I'll pick on The Martian one more time. When you see a movie, if anybody saw that, the ship that they were in, not the one that Matt Damon was in on the surface, but the ship, it's this huge thing. It's like a hotel. I thought that was awesome. You could be running on a treadmill with no one around you for as long as you could see it. You could go to the galley and float through. Well, that's not the truth. The truth is, we would typically go to Mars probably in something like a VW microbus. And there'd be 6 people in that much space for 8 months. So imagine your conversation after about the first maybe month. Hey, how's it going? Same as it was 5 minutes ago. What are you talking about? Do you have any other stories? I know your entire life. There's nothing else. Maybe you actually want to be asleep, I don't know. But anyway, it would be a very small space, and this is a way to maximize the number of people. So this is a project we're working on currently. It's funded by NASA. Our launch services business, and I'm going to show you little pictures here, and I realize it's hard for some of you to see, but we're recording this. Our launch services business goes around the idea that satellites are getting smaller. And I brought, and I could even sort of hold it up later, I think, or Gene, if you wanted to grab it, that would help me, thank you. I brought something called a CubeSat, C-U-B-E, a CubeSat. This satellite that Gene's going to help me with is a full-size satellite. Now, you're used to seeing a satellite that may be launched on a huge rocket, maybe 40 feet long or 20 feet long. today, electronics technology has made cell phones smaller, it's making satellites smaller. So that 3D CubeSat is an actual full-size satellite. So if you're going to launch a satellite that big, how big of a rocket do you need? Not really a very big rocket. Yeah, no, that's really good. That's good.
Yeah, that's good.
So, in theory, you could put the rocket underneath an airplane, and in this case, we have a Learjet. In that case, we have a Gulfstream G3, and you put the rocket underneath, put a couple of those small satellites on the nose, and launch them into orbit. We are currently proposing to do this out of Jacksonville, Florida. This micro company of mine is based in Chamblee. We've got a small engineering group. We're working with others across the country to provide propulsion systems, but we're doing the design work, the guidance work, all here in Atlanta, and we hope to launch these out of Florida coming up in a couple of years, so it's in development. So that's being done right here. The next company that I have, I started with a professor colleague of mine at Georgia Tech, and now we're doing it entirely at Spaceworks. It's called Terminal Velocity Aerospace. And Gene, while you're over there, this will be the last one, I promise you. Terminal Velocity Aerospace. So the idea of bringing samples back from the space station is of interest to researchers. So the space station is doing a lot of good science on orbit. They're making biological samples and pharmaceutical samples and material samples. How can you get those back to the ground kind of on demand? So think of it like the FedEx of space, or since I'm from Atlanta, I'll say the UPS of space. But one of the things you have to do is survive the heat pulse. So it's you come down at something like 5 miles a second, Mach 25, and you have to decelerate to some controlled entry like this. And how do you survive that? The heating rate on the front of these little capsules may be as high as 3,000 or 3,500 degrees on the front. So we're making heat shield materials like this, and I pass this around. Just ask you not to open it. We're making those here at Atlanta. So we're making heat shield materials. We're making small capsules like this, and we are flying our first 3 experiments to the space station this December or maybe early January, depending on the flight. So an Atlanta-based company will be flying small reentry capsules from the space station within 6 or 8 months, and so we're very proud of that. These are some different examples of things we've done. We did a balloon drop test of the capsule. Our capsule was way there at the front out in Oregon last summer. And we did some heat shield testing of this material that I'm passing around. We did that out in California last fall to make sure that it would work. This is a picture of our capsule. Our capsule is only about this big. It's very small. Our capsule in an ArcJet test facility at NASA Ames. Yes, sir.
If I saw correctly, there was an arm next to the jet. So your capsule can be escalated by that arm if that's the case in that top picture.
Could be.
That's your capsule?
Yeah, that's it.
Okay, there's a fellow's arm. So
Yeah, the size. You're saying the size.
Yes.
Yeah, it's not very big. So these are small samples. Can generally return about 8 kilograms or so. One of the interesting things is the growth of stem cells. So I don't know how you feel about stem cells. These are not embryonic stem cells. They're adult stem cells. But still, stem cells potentially are a revolution in medicine. And they can be grown with a high quality and faster in space than they can be on the ground. So maybe manufacture stem cells. It's best if they're your stem cells. So we could take a sample, put it in space for a couple of months, come down, and you have your life supply. So that's something we can do. These are very small capsules. Okay, our satellite company is called Blink, and that's a company that I started last fall. And its business is to take the CubeSats, which Gene helped me show, take those CubeSats, put them into low Earth orbit, and use them as essentially cell phone towers. Use them as cell phone towers for small transmitters that can collect information, so that as it pertains to Georgia, one of the applications that we foresee is farming. So the resource in farming is water, and if you can conserve or control the use of that water very precisely, they actually call it precision farming. Through satellite communications, then we propose to do that. So there are sensors buried in the ground in South Georgia, there will be, that measure the water content at different levels. So 6 inches down, 12 inches down, 18 inches down in the cotton fields and the peanut fields in South Georgia. The satellite flies over, and the sensors basically tell you what the water content is, and it keeps the farmer from having to go and dig holes everywhere to determine that information. And then that tells them when to water or not water. So that kind of information is called machine-to-machine connectivity, or if you've heard of the Internet of Things, that's what we're pursuing. And the devices are very small, so they're little handheld devices. They run on a couple of batteries. They last about a year, and the satellite provides the network. So we're working on that here in Atlanta too. We hope to go to field testing pretty soon. We're actually using a remote control helicopter to act like a satellite. Yeah, it's a surrogate satellite. And so it'll fly over, and the little trackers will track and send information to the helicopter, and then we'll take it to space. So that's Blink Astro. This is generally a concept of how that company would work. You see that on the website.
Do you have your test sites already?
Yes, it's
certified?
outside of Cartersville, Georgia, in northwest Georgia. Yeah. Oh, for the experiment I just mentioned.
Yeah.
Now for the precision farming, it's down near Tifton. Yeah, South Georgia. Okay, so let's see. So one thing I wanted to talk about, since I'm here with you all, is one of our commitments to outreach to students. So as engineers, or as aerospace engineers as I am, we are committed to the next generation of students to try to make them aware of what we do, to try to interest them in fields related to science, technology, engineering, math. Some people, by the way, will put an A in that too, which I'm okay with if you do. Science, technology, engineering, arts, and math, STEAM, but I'll call it STEM for today. But we're committed to that. All of us, we kind of got in a group together, all of us at the company said that it made a big difference in our lives to have internships or have opportunities to shadow engineers or have an opportunity maybe to spend a little time at a company to see what that's like. Now, not everyone that we interact with becomes an aerospace engineer or becomes an astronaut, but we're trying to give them an opportunity. So I was going to talk about two programs we have. So I just said that a little bit. We're partnered with an organization that's NASA funded here in the state of Georgia called the Georgia Space Grant Consortium. NASA provides a little bit of money to each state in the country every year to try to encourage students to go into space-related or technology-related fields. That particular organization is housed at Georgia Tech, but it's a NASA office. Well, it's a NASA-funded office, I should say. So we're working with the Georgia Space Grant Consortium. A little hard to see, but these are the kind of young folks that we touch. So it's been, let's see, I think we've been in the college intern game for over 10 years, maybe 12 years. And we provide the opportunity for college students to come and work with us. These are enthusiastic people. For the most part, they are from colleges around Georgia, or at least the East Coast. They'll come here for the summer, they'll come here for the fall. We pay them, so they get paid an hourly wage. And they'll work with us and try to learn what it's like to be an aerospace engineer. So we have a great diversity of people that come in, men and women. We're actively recruiting as much as we can. We're trying to recruit women and minorities into our field. And so we reach out in various places and try to bring people into aerospace engineering. Now we keep statistics on where they go and what they end up doing. A very high percentage of them end up continuing their STEM education and going into practice somewhere as an engineer. So we're proud of our record here. These are some other young folks, just pictures of folks that we've had at the college level. Wordle chart that shows what they do, but when they come here, we give them something fun to work on. Space tourism jumps out at me here. Landing simulations or landing speeds and rollouts that you would do in aircraft design. So they do technical work for us. They don't just file papers. They do CAD, they do design, they do economic analysis, market prediction, those kinds of things. One of the things that we're also very proud of is the high school program. And it almost exclusively is focused on schools in the metro Atlanta area. So we recruit some folks for the summer into the high school program. Now these are people that have not yet made their decision as to what they're going to do for their careers. They may have an interest in science, interest in engineering. They may be juniors in high school. We've had them as young as sophomores in high school. And they find out about our program and they say, I want to spend a little bit of my summer seeing what it's like to be an aerospace professional. We give them challenging projects to work on, and you can see, if you can make it out, you can see some of the different spacecraft and satellite designs that they have created over the years. It's a 3-week program. Now, the high school program is not paid, but the students gain experience for the opportunity, nor do we charge them. And we've done very well with this program as well. I heard it mentioned before about the Gwinnett School of Science, Math, and Technology. So Gwinnett School of Science, Math, and Technology is a very impressive school for technically oriented young folks. And we have a strong program with them. We have a strong program with Wheeler High School over in Cobb County and other local schools in the metro Atlanta area. So we're proud of that program. We just finished the one for this summer. I don't have a picture of the students that we picked from this summer. But for the first time, we had someone from out of state. We had a student from Texas. Came all the way from Texas to work for our high school program here. Anyway, so I'm very proud of that. All right, so what I wanted to do is just kind of give you an overview today of what we do. I know there's perhaps some questions that you might have for me, the things that we do. And so I'll leave you with that as an introduction, and happy to take any questions you have. Start, yes, sir.
Two-step question.
2 steps.
Your operation appears to be a brain trust consortium of very effective scientific minds. Are you fairly unique in the country? And that there, as you say, there are 25 of you. It's the main base. Are there others like you in the country? And then that leads to the second question.
Okay, I'll answer the first part first. So yes, we have competitors. We have people that do similar things that we do. Typically not in the state of Georgia, at least not yet. But every day there are more people trying to get into the space business. People see it as a revolutionary opportunity to change the world. In particular, I think the space business, again, maybe in my generation we were drawn in by Apollo, maybe the space shuttle. I think today's generation is drawn by what can space exploration do to change the world. The millennial mindset is how can I make a difference to the world. And so Earth observation, information, taking pictures of rainforest, those kinds of things appeal to me. So there are more companies like ours growing up, but I wouldn't say a lot. I'd say a handful of competitors.
That leads to the second part of the question, which is you think part of your success, and obviously you are successful, is your close proximity to tech and the resources that they have and you have to offer.
That's right. Yeah, we have a strong relationship with both Georgia Tech and Georgia Tech Research Institute, GTRI. As I mentioned in my remarks, Georgia Tech produces the largest number of aerospace engineering students in the country, and that's there are probably 600 undergraduate aerospace engineering students at Georgia Tech, and Georgia Tech pulls from outside of Georgia too.
More than Emory?
Yes, Georgia Tech is more than Emory. But yeah, it's a big part of our success. That and the airport. Yes.
In the last 48 articles, I read a news article about the effects of being in outer space on vision and actual eyeballs. Astronauts are experiencing changes. Mm-hmm. Have you even started in on that with the Spaces project?
Yeah, and actually we think it may help. Thank you for the question, Mark. So there are things that happen to the human body in space, and NASA has done a lot of interesting experiments. If you kept up lately, the Kelly twins, they're both astronauts, but one of them spent a year on the space station, the other was on the ground, and they're comparing their physiology as a result of that difference. So the relaxation of the muscles around your eyes is one of the effects. So just like you're talking, it affects your vision because your muscles don't have to work as hard, they don't work against 1G, and so relaxes your muscles around your eyes, and that makes your vision change. Muscle atrophy, so the idea that your muscles become weak if they're not used, and you see the astronauts on the space station running on treadmills with big bungee cords to keep them from flying off, so they have springy kind of things, and that happened in the movie also. And then the last thing is your bone, so like an osteoporosis type thing, but bone decalcification. Decalcification is the third effect. All right, so if you're in stasis, your metabolism slows down, and we think that could have some beneficial effect as opposed to the alternative of staying awake the entire time. That's one. And the other are the effects of radiation. So in space, you're constantly exposed to radiation, particularly when you get into what we call deep space, which is outside the Van Allen radiation belts, that magnetic fields that protect the Earth. So once you're past that, you're in sort of the wide open radiation exposure from various sources. The sun produces radiation, the sun produces solar event radiation, and there's background radiation. So you essentially would love to put people in a lead-lined room for 6 months so that they're just totally protected from background radiation. And you can imagine, again, how small that place would have to be. So with our concept, you're sort of asleep, and so I can, I'm not so much worried about personal space. I can be right next to the other guy or lady, and we can all be protected by radiation. So I hope there's a benefit, but TBD. Did you have a question here? Sorry, I know there are questions over here, but was there one more that I missed earlier?
I needed to make it go.
Okay. It was,
Well, I'm a stockbroker nowadays, and a lot of my clients are always asking me, how can they get in early with what is the next Ford Motor Company or whatever? And, right now, there's nothing publicly available, and you sort of provide what I'm kind of seeing as support services, or maybe you sell to the other people and stuff, and maybe you have your own, but I would want to invest in your
To stop you at this point, thank you, Dr. Olson. Don't go far. Don't go far. I know this just looks like a certificate. It's a memento, but in your honor, we're sending a hero box to an active duty soldier filled with items that they've requested. And if you'll leave me your business card, I'll make sure it's in there with you. Thank you very much. Oh, awesome. Okay, I'm not a space cadet, but yes, I slept with the map of the universe. I'm still disappointed about Pluto being downgraded, but I did go out and visit that planetarium.